Hey everybody, this is Alan from Woodcrest Bonsai, and today I want to do a video on adventitious buds. And adventitious buds, botanically, are defined as buds that are dormant along a trunk that will sprout if the top of a tree has been damaged. The term adventitious is not really a botanical term. It just simply means found where you normally wouldn't expect. So I've got numerous different examples that I'm going to show you, and we're going to end with the sea hibiscus that's in the ground that I cut back from about 8 feet high to about 6 inches high, and he will be at the end of this video. So the specimen that we're looking at now is a Suriname cherry, and I dug this out of the ground last year. I have a huge one that was given to me by the birds, and it's so plainly obvious that it was planted by birds because it's growing directly against my fence. So the bird perched on the fence, pooped out the seed, and the rest is history. I also have some azaleas in my landscape out front, and this guy was encroaching on one of the azaleas. So I dug it up, and it was easily 3 feet high. As you can see, you've got the chop right here, and it's quite extensive. And there's some damage. The loppers that I used didn't cut it perfectly. But the only thing on this tree at all, when I dug it out of the ground, was the trunk and this leader right here, this little guy right here. This heavier leader, the tree has grown. So I have a tree, when I've dug it out of the ground, absolutely nothing except for this very thin leader. And you know, I like my trees to have some movement, and if you've watched my channel, you understand the way I style my trees. But the plant said, no, I don't think I like this little leader. I'm going to send up a more powerful leader. So it put all its energy into doing this one. And if we look, it's by far the tallest growth. This is the original leader that I had left, and this is the new leader that the plant has grown. And of course, that's just the leaders. All this other stuff here, all this little tiny stuff down here, which goes virtually all the way to the base of the trunk, all emerged since I did the cut. Once again, when I dug this out of the ground and I did the chop, all it was just a bare trunk and this leader. So all this extra growth has emerged from adventitious buds. So there are buds up and down the trunk that will sprout if a tree detects damage. And obviously, even though a human did this with loppers, the tree still thinks damage. So then it will sprout like crazy. Certain trees sprout differently. Certain trees will sprout with a massive amount of new buds. And that's all about knowing your material. So Suriname cherries certainly sprout some, but they're nothing like something like an ilex shillings or even an azalea. But those are adventitious buds. Now what am I going to do with this guy? You know, I'm really looking at keeping the thick leader and removing the thin one. Although the thin one would give me a whole bunch more taper, I don't think it really needs all that much taper. Suriname cherries are not a tree that gets a massive trunk, so that's my plan. Right now, what I'm going to do with it is put it back on the bench and let it continue to grow, even all this little stuff here. Now, if I let this lower stuff all grow and the branches get thicker, then it's going to leave scars when I cut them off. And so if I want a tree with a really thin, smooth bark with no scars, then I'd cut them off like today, right now. I'd go get my scissors and start cutting them away. But sometimes you can leave them grow, and then the scars they produce add a little bit of extra age to the trunk. So right now this guy is still in the formative stages. It's certainly healthy because it's grown out of the pot. So I see a little tiny bit of fertilizer, so I'm going to give it a good fertilizer and then just let it continue. My decision on whether I want the small leader or the bigger one that the tree has decided to push can come later. And so will my branch placement. Obviously, if the tree is coming like this and then coming back this way, one of these two is going to be the first main branch. This one is in a perfect angle to be the first main branch, but this one is a little higher and at a better position, and with a little bit of wire, it could come and take this guy's place. That's all in the future. Today I just wanted to show you the ability of adventitious buds to sprout once a tree has had some damage. So that's Suriname cherry. It's a fairly tropical plant, does not grow up north. You would have to give it some kind of wintertime protection to get it to live. And they do produce an edible cherry, but I don't know, I don't like them. They're a little, unless they're perfectly ripe, they're a little bit sour. And even when they're perfectly ripe, they're still, let's put it this way, it ain't like a regular cherry. So that's that guy. Now these next two are what I call firebush. This is a very popular landscape plant in these areas. And these were seedlings that I collected in August, what do we add? 2024? 2023. Collected the seed in August of 2023, planted them in a bed, and then when they grew to about, about this thick right here, I put them all in individual pots. And then all of last year, so seed in August, they germinate over the winter, didn't really do much with them. Then in spring of 2024, I all planted them in their own individual containers, and then I just let them grow, totally unchecked. And so as you can see here, we have the chop. And this guy, plus I have maybe 15 of these, maybe 20. And I all let them just grow. I didn't trim them whatsoever. And oh man, they were falling over on each other because they got so high. They got 3 feet easily. And then just this spring, I did the chop. And so this is all the new growth from after I did the chop just this spring. And once again, if we look up, if we pan up, we see that it's growing like crazy. And I've got a second one of these that's not as vigorous. It's as vigorous, but it doesn't have a leader that got as tall. So once again, adventitious buds. Now these guys don't produce a tremendous amount of buds. And this tree has some things that probably need to be addressed fairly soon, like these bar branches. If I leave these here, in fact, you can really already see it. There's going to be a big knob there if I leave both of these to thicken. Even pruning them off with concave cutters, there's going to be a big knob there. So I am not entirely sure that either one of those is going to be part of the design. So I may take them off completely. And this is another bud that came from very, very low down. It's also got a very interesting nabari. I tried to feather them out, but, Mother Nature has other plans. So, could this be a sacrifice branch? Well, in theory, but it's so low that it's only going to thicken this part of the trunk. It's not going to really do much. So this is another, it's probably unnecessary. However, these guys are in the stage of growth and reduction, and growth and reduction. So if we spin it around here, we see that a bud emerged right at the scar, and now it is going to be the next leader, and I'm going to let it just grow again this year, completely unchecked. I may remove some of these other things that are going to cause problems, but this guy here, this leader, I'm just going to let it take off, which will put even more energy into this trunk, and it will get thicker and thicker. And that's probably another 2 or 3 years that I will do that before I begin to decide how I want to style these guys. So just move him to the side. Here's another one, exactly the same age, exactly the same treatment. And you can see the trunk is very, very similar, but it never got that leader. Another thing I have to admit is that they've been ravaged by aphids, especially the top, the tips. You see all this deformed growth at the tips. Some of them, I mean, these are two that are pretty good, but some of them, the aphids have just gone nutso. And I'm not sure whether that's that big of a deal. It certainly has stunted some of their growth. But here's another one. All these little tiny buds down here. Here's the chop. This plant was 3 feet high. When I chopped it, it had nothing. It was just a stump. And then we've got 2, 3, 4 very small branches emerging. And then we have basically 3 different leaders, 1, 2, 3, that are all basically competing for the apex. Unlike the first one where one took off and started growing at the expense of the others. But I like the motion of this here. And this motion, like on this guy and on this guy, the motion of these guys, that's all Mother Nature. They did that all by themselves. I did not coax them or wire them or do anything. But there you go, more adventitious buds. Just a stump. And once again, at this point I can take an inventory. I probably want this guy to be the new leader. If it's going to be an informal upright, if I want a slanting style, I will choose this one. And this stump was cut fairly straight across, which I usually try to avoid. If you can see on this one, the chop was more at about a 45-degree angle, which is what I like to do. But sometimes when you're doing, like mass production, I'm not, anywhere near mass production, but, I just went through and just went choink, 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 choink. You didn't know that loppers made that noise, did you? I didn't either. I just made it up. So that guy needs to be, the chop needs to be cleaned up. And once again, at this point, just let him grow. Let him grow. What I want, more than anything, is for the trunks to thicken. And once the trunks get, about the size of my thumb, or even bigger, something like that, maybe an inch across, then I can start working on some other stuff, keeping in mind that some work, like taking this stump and making it less obvious, is worthwhile doing now, so that over time it won't be an issue. Get rid of it. Get rid of the issue now, and let the tree continue to grow, and then you won't have to worry about it in the future. So those are firebush. I think some people call these by another name. They're called firebush because they produce fairly bright red flowers in the summer that are quite attractive to pollinators. So they're a fairly popular plant in this area. Oh, and I could bring, 10, 20, 30 other trees that have adventitious buds. But I'm going to end with a couple of narrowleaf ficus. Should I zoom in on these guys? Maybe I should have zoomed in on everything. So narrowleaf ficus is another one that will produce massive amounts of adventitious buds. As you can see here, the original trunk chop was right there. Then it grew, these are a little bit older than the firebush. Then it grew to a point, and then is there another trunk chop? I thought there was, but it doesn't appear as though there is, but it's got lichens, so they're pretty old. But as you can see, just a massive amount of sprouting. Now, not much on the trunk, but the beauty of Ficus nerifolia especially is that now I can pick and choose whatever branching I want. You know, I did a video on these guys, premature bonsai potting, where I featured 6, 8, maybe more than that, where I just stuck young trees in training into bonsai pots and just let it do what it may. And this is one of those. So it's certainly not a finished tree, but it's certainly a good example of adventitious buds, how it just popped just everywhere. And then the next one is even a better example of that. And this is just a really nice tree. I really like this tree. Excuse the oak tree. I'm going to yank him out of there and put him in a pot when I work this tree. And as you can see, it's got the perfect kind of branching that I like. First branch, second branch, apex. It's really nicely formed. Does need some work, so like this first main branch splits into two right at the trunk, so I would choose one of those, and I'm probably going to bring the front more like this. So we've got our second main branch here, we've got our first main branch here. But what I wanted to show you was the stuff that I took off of this guy, because once again I chopped it down to almost nothing, and it just exploded with growth. So even these main branches that are now 3-4 inches, they weren't there. It was just a stump. And then on the trunk, you can see all these little knobs. And every one of those knobs is a place where I took off a very young shoot. So had I done nothing with this tree, all these little tiny knobs, let's see, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, maybe 20, 25 little tiny shoots. And it was just like a cousin-it. It was like it is up here, except all down the trunk. And obviously, the way I style my trees is the bottom third of the trunk is clear. So I waited a little bit. So here's another good example. These little tiny ones. Imagine them all up and down the trunk. And I allowed them to get about 1.5 inches before I cut them. And so now that gives me a kind of knobby, kind of more aged looking trunk. If I wanted a really smooth trunk, like the last one, I could have taken them off much sooner when they were really young, like these two little guys here. And I obviously don't need these two little guys because my bonsai styling is very minimalist. I want first main branch, second main branch, and then there's really not going to be anything in between. So I can take those off with my fingers. And right away it cleans up the tree. Just amazingly, just taking those little two guys off. So if you want to have kind of a knobby trunk, leave your adventitious buds to grow a little thicker, and then when you prune them, you get the little scars there that can help give the impression of age on a tree. And now I need to pause, take the camera to a completely different place in my yard, and show you the sea hibiscus that I chopped from about 8 or 9 feet down to 6 or 7 inches, and we'll see what's going on with that guy. So here we are. And my tripod, even set as low as it will go, can't really get a good shot of this thing. Maybe I can bring it down like that. Get the tripod in place. There we go. Okay. So here's the stump. And I will leave a link to me cutting this stump at the end of this video. So talk about adventitious buds. It was just nothing. And I want this leader here to be the future of the tree. Because once again, it's in perfect spot. In fact, I cut the trunk at the angle purposefully because I knew I had a bud there. Now it's interesting because if we look, this growth here and actually this growth here are coming from way down here. And you see it's beginning to compete as the leader for the leader that I really want. There's some other stuff that's coming from very low down that's also much more vigorous than the leader. The leader has some kind of leaf damage, and I'm not quite sure what that is. But there we go. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and this 7th is a double. So we have 7 buds that have popped since the chop. Once again, click on that video at the end, the link to that video, and this thing was just nothing. It was just a stick. So now what to do with it? Well, it's the same kind of philosophy as I just talked about with the narrow-leaf ficus. Do I want a smooth trunk, or do I want a kind of knobby, ugly trunk to make the tree look older? And I think I'm leaning towards knobby. Now this guy's in the ground, so and it didn't disturb the roots at all, so it's got the strength to regrow. But another reason that I've done nothing with this, by the way, I haven't even pinched, because I want the entire plant to regain strength. I do not want to chop all of this stuff off of here and just force the leader, and then possibly the tree say, well, you know, I don't want to do that, and lose that leader. There is a possibility that if I chop all this stuff off, that the tree's just going to pop brand new adventitious buds. It's just going to say, sorry, buddy. So, for now, it's in the same stage as the firebush. Chop it way back and then let it regrow. One thing I am going to do, and I'm going to do that right now, is I'm going to try to keep this guy, which will eventually be the new leader, because you can see the leaves are much healthier. We've got a brand new one coming right here, and it's almost at the level of the leader that I want to keep. Is that even in the damn... Okay, there's the leader that I want to keep. So I'm going to pinch this off just to make sure that it doesn't pump too much energy and that become the leader. Now, if I did that, I'd have a tree that had a pretty funky turn, which may not be that bad, but this is what I want. And when we're growing bonsai, you know, we have the ability to manipulate the tree to the point to create the image that we want. That's part of doing bonsai. But this is another perfect example of adventitious buds. What did I say? 7? See, I got this little tiny guy right here, another little tiny guy right here, little tiny guy right here. And then paradoxically, the lower buds have been given more energy by the tree. So this low bud here has elongated to about 3 inches or more and has 4, 5, 6. Is that another one? Oh yeah, there's another one way at the base. So that's adventitious buds. So now when you're working with adventitious buds, or when you're growing trees and you want to do the major chop to give your trees more taper, you know, a thicker trunk, you've got to make sure that the timing is correct. Most of the time it's early spring when the trees are just getting ready to emerge with new growth. That's the best place, best time of the year to do a major trunk chop on the trees that you're trying to thicken up. If you notice, on all of these trees, I didn't root prune any of them. Root pruning and a major trunk chop is possible, but I much prefer to do one or the other. And so when they're in the formative stages of just growth and reduction, remember this guy here was literally 8 feet high, and now it's about 7 or 8 inches. There's my hand, there's the ground, 1 hand high. So I don't like to disturb the roots of a tree I'm going to do a major chop on. And that's part of the reason that this guy is responding so well, is that the root system still has all the energy it needs to resprout. And it was the same with the 2 firebush. They were in the same pot. They were just cut back, but the roots were not manipulated whatsoever. And it was also the same with the 2 Ficus nervifolia. Same thing. The chop was performed with no manipulation of the roots at all. You know, I've learned through the years that bonsai is a combination of horticulture and artistry. And I've got to get the horticulture right, or else the artistry is pretty hard. So it's just, for me, it's just way too stressful for me to root prune a tree and chop it way back. And it may not die, but then it has to recover on 2 different fronts. It has to regrow roots and a top, and typically what you're going to get is slower top growth, which will create, well, it'll take longer for the tree to get the thickness that you may be looking for. So there you go, just a short video on adventitious buds. And the only one other caveat that I want to add is that pine trees and conifers have very few adventitious buds. And if you chop a tree to a stump, you may just kill it. If you chop a limb to a stump with no other back budding already, that limb may die. So conifers and pines are like a whole nother world. And honestly, I have never grown a pine tree in the 40 years I've been doing bonsai. I don't need to. I have plenty of other stuff. And, you know, okay, so maybe I'm lazy and I don't really want to learn how to do a pine, or, you know, I could give you all the excuses in the world. But they're just a whole different critter. But every other tree, any kind of angiosperm plant, has adventitious buds as a survival mechanism for damage. If a tree gets blown over or the top gets snapped off in high winds, you know, hurricane or something like that, virtually every tree on the planet except for conifers has the ability to pop back. And you can use that to your advantage to create thick trunks and more movement in your bonsai. So that's it for this video. If you've never used adventitious buds, or if you're afraid to cut, because that's such a huge fear of most beginners. It's, oh no, I could never cut it like that. Well, yes, you can. And hopefully this video has proved to you that you can. I suppose what I need to do in another video, and maybe like make a montage, is to do even more cuts, because this one did get the cut, which you are going to be able to click on the link to that video where you see this plant that we're looking at right now go from about 8 to 9 feet to the stump that you see here. So don't be afraid, especially in the early stages of trees. It depends on what you want. Don't be afraid to do the cutback. And then there's some patience involved too. I mean, this thing here isn't going to be a bonsai for another maybe 5 years, maybe longer than that. But that's okay because the time goes by and, you know, it will come. It will come if I'm working on it diligently the way I need to be working on it. It will come. Time goes by, whether you like it or not. That's one thing I know for sure. What's a Rolling Stone song? Time waits for no one, and it won't wait for me. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell if you haven't already. Leave a comment on anybody else out there using adventitious buds like this to their advantage, because this is a great way to make trunk thickness and taper. So thank you so much for watching Woodcrest Bonsai.